When I think about motivation, I think it's very feelings based, right? When we feel motivated, we feel like we can and we want to achieve certain things. Welcome back to Bold Clarity, where we slow the noise, tell the truth, and make room for the people that we are becoming. So far this season, we have been having conversations around making sure that we align our actions to who we want to be. We've talked about discipline as self-trust. We've talked about the votes that our habits are casting for ourselves, and most recently, the standards that we set and how that kind of guides us. And today, the conversation that we're going to have is around something that I think is at the root of all of that, which is making decisions. And I know it sounds simple, and it's something that I think is so important and requires a high level of intentionality. And so I am very passionate about this topic and have had several personal encounters with decision making lately. So I am thrilled to have this conversation about what really is underneath all of this alignment, which is making decisions. So I'm going to frame this conversation around motivation and what that really is and what it means. And so I'm going to start with a story where I felt super motivated. So about a month ago, I was sitting at home and I don't even know if stress is the right word. I was just in a heavy place. I was not sad. I wasn't dissatisfied. I just felt this heaviness. And so, for those of y'all that don't know, I work in real estate and hold the position of team leader for an expansion team, which I absolutely love. And it's something that I did after my years working in education, and then actually being in full production as an agent, meaning I was actually working with clients full time. And then I had the opportunity to be promoted to team leader, which was like this perfect mesh of education where I'm teaching and I'm helping and I'm coaching, and then also my love of real estate that I developed. Nonetheless, in this particular moment, it'd been probably about a week of just heaviness. And I was sitting at home, and it was a day that my boyfriend happened to be at home as well. And I said, "Can you please come sit with me?" And he sat with me, and I was like, "I don't know. I need something." And so I can't remember if he offered or if I asked for him to pray for me. Long story short, he prays for me. And when he prays for me, I have this moment of scary clarity where I get this message from God that's like, "Quit your job." And I'm like, no, no way. This doesn't make any sense. And then I said, okay, well, I'm going to listen to God because that's what I do. And that's how I even got where I was professionally, right? And so after the moments of what the heck came this very intense happiness and motivation that translated into hours of me locking myself in this office and just writing. Who am I? What are all of the gifts inside of me that have been given? How do I make those things a reality? What's most important to me? And I came up with this. Honestly, if somebody ever saw it, which I've got pictures and one day I'll share, these insane notes that maybe don't make sense to anybody. And I walked away from this experience like, all right, okay, here we go. This is what we're doing, okay? And I was, one might say, highly motivated in that moment to make the decision and say, wow, I'm going to walk away from this job. That happened on a Friday. On the very next Monday, I sat down with my manager, mentor, one of my very dear friends, and I'm like, hey, by the way, this is what I'm doing. And she was shocked and ended up being super supportive. Nonetheless, once I started telling people, and then in the coming weeks, after we kind of talked through when my last date would be, there were a lot of decisions that were to be made. And I am so excited because I'm actually going to be leaning into this platform and building out my own coaching program. And that's what came of that session after the prayer with my boyfriend. And what I was not prepared for was, okay, well, what happens in these moments where my boyfriend hasn't just prayed for me and I haven't just sat down and come up with this amazing insight on what I think is next for me? What happens when that's all gone and I'm in the thick of it and I'm finishing out this role while also building out this coaching program and figuring out, well, how is this all going to work? Because let me be very clear, I was scared. There were moments of doubt and me just not knowing exactly if I'd made the right decision. And in those moments, had I made decisions based on how I felt, if I'm being really honest, I'm pretty sure I would have called up my manager, mentor, friend and said, hey, never mind, I'm staying. Spoiler alert, I did not do that. And the reason that I did not is because I made a decision. And when I made that decision, even though it overall was made in a moment of intense motivation and intense emotion, me making that decision required a commitment from me. And I am a pretty loyal person to other people, and I'm working on being loyal to myself. And what that meant was, hey, even in the moments when it's tough, even in the moments where you didn't just have this amazing moment of prayer, you committed to this. You know that this is what you're supposed to do. And so you're going to over and over again make this decision in the little things that you do. And I had just the biggest aha around making decisions when maybe we don't have that intense moment of motivation. And so if you're like me at all and have ever had an experience where, you feel so motivated and maybe there's people around you, maybe you've just left a conference and you're feeling like you're just on this super high. Maybe you had a dream and you woke up the next day and you were like, yes, this is happening. If you're like me and you have those moments, but then when that moment passes, you struggle with, oh gosh, well, what do I actually do now? This conversation is absolutely for you because we're going to get into when the motivation is not there. How do we still commit to our decisions and how do we make the micro decisions that build up to the big one? So the first thing that I wanted to highlight is, what is motivation? We use this word so much. We talk about our own motivation. We talk about the motivation of people around us. There's motivational speakers. And when you really think about it, right, motivation has to do with this drive for you to orient yourself towards a goal. And in reality, it is very feelings based, right? Typically, when we talk about being motivated, we are equating it to some emotional state where we feel like, okay, I can do this, I want to do this, and I'm going to do this. The reality is that is not always how we feel 24/7. And so what I want to talk about is the myth behind motivation, okay? Which is a lot of us have the belief that we must feel motivated in order to make decisions that align to bigger decisions that we've already made. For example, right, if we go back to that story, I previously have held the belief that I have to be motivated at every point in time from the time that I say, all right, I am quitting this job, I'm stepping down from this role, then motivation is what's going to carry me through the weeks where I'm kind of doing two jobs at once, right? I'm building out my own business and also still, being responsible for my role as team leader. In those hard moments, if I don't feel motivated, then I won't do it. Which, here's the thing, that might be true, that when you don't feel motivated, you won't do it. But that doesn't have to be the truth. That doesn't have to be the reality, because there's a different perspective that we can adopt that will allow us to still be committed and to still make those decisions even when the feeling is not there. Motivation is not consistent. And so if we plan what we do and we make our decisions based on something that is inconsistent, we ourselves are going to become inconsistent. And that is something that I've struggled with a lot in the past, is just this pattern of highs and lows, highs and lows. One day I'm feeling super motivated and I can accomplish everything, but then the next day when that feeling goes away, I do nothing. And I just want to empower all of us with the truth that even when we don't feel like it, we still have the capacity to choose to do the things that are aligned to who we want to become. And I have an example of when I told this lie to myself about how much motivation needs to be there, and kind of use that as a crutch when it came to making a decision. And so if anybody knows me and you're pretty close to me, you probably know that at some point in time, I have expressed that I want to wake up at 5 a.m. I think that waking up at 5 a.m., which I have done in the past, when I was a teacher, I would go to spin class that started at 5:30. And so I woke up between 4:45 and 5. Not every day, but most of the time. And so I know, what a positive impact that has on me and just how my brain works and my approach for the day. And as I've since been on my journey of motherhood, I know how valuable it is for me to have time to myself in the morning before I get into mom mode and get my daughter ready for school. And so what has happened is, or what had happened, is that I told myself, all right, Asia, you can't just go from waking up at 6:30 to waking up at 5. You got to ease yourself into it. And so this week, we're going to wake up at 6:25, and then the next week, 6:20, and then 6:15, and so on and so forth until you get to 5 a.m. And then you're going to be ready and you're going to be prepared to wake up at 5 a.m. consistently. And that didn't work. This tiered plan, which in my mind was to account for the fact that I have classified myself as somebody who is not a morning person, meaning how I feel in the morning is not aligned to how I want to show up. There's a huge gap there. And so the weight of waking up at 5 a.m. is very heavy for me. And so to combat that, I thought, let me put in this plan, let me ease into it so that when the feeling of motivation isn't there, I'm going to still be able to do it. Yeah, that didn't work. However, recently there was a situation, I can't remember exactly what it was. And before I went to bed, I told my boyfriend, I'm waking up at 5 a.m. tomorrow because I need to do X, Y, Z. And there's something very specific that I needed to do. And that was the only time that I could do it because I think I didn't finish it from the night before. Nonetheless, I woke up at 5 a.m., did all the things, went about my day, and I was reminded of, yeah, this is why you wake up at 5 a.m. So then I made this decision. I said, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. from here on out. And I have. Granted, there's been some days where I definitely listen to my body and I say, okay, maybe I'll wake up at 6:30, or on the weekends, of course, I try to sleep in. And yet I said, I am going to wake up at 5 a.m. And then I did. And the motivation, right? The feeling is not there every morning when that alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Okay. I don't see my alarm go off and go, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so excited to wake up at 5 a.m. No. Okay. And I'm so committed to the decision. I'm so loyal to myself that because I declared that I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I tried to think about what was the difference between the past when I've tried to get back into that habit of waking up at 5 and then this time. What made it different that I actually stuck to it? And it was just simple because I decided that I was going to. I didn't decide that I was going to ease in and do this 5-minute increment plan, which if that is what works for you, fantastic, right? And for me, it allowed space for other things to happen, for other things to take place. And so what it was simply that I declared, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. And so I did it. And it was just such a powerful moment for me to think about, wow, what happens when we truly make a decision? And I think most of us could agree we can feel the difference between when I truly decide something versus when I say it. And if you think about the standards conversation in the previous episode, right? Like a lot of times we say that this is our standard, and then in reality it's not. And typically we know the difference. And so the difference in when I declare something, I make a decision, and I know that with every fiber of my body, of my being, that I'm going to orient myself towards that decision. That is a totally different experience than me just letting words flow out of my mouth that I really don't mean. And oh my goodness, how cool, how empowering, how amazing that we can make a decision and then we actually get to commit to it. And so I want to talk about what happens when you make that decision and what it actually does. And the first thing is that it stops the negotiation with yourself. So thinking back to the increments that I was working on to get to 5 a.m. In reality, that was a negotiation. Instead of I'm waking up at 5 a.m. and like this starts now, it was like okay, so since you're not going to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow or the next day, here's something we can implement. Here's a way that like we can kind of do it. We can kind of say that we're working towards it, but we're not quite doing it. That was a negotiation. When I made the decision that I was going to wake up at 5 a.m., there was nothing to negotiate. There wasn't. It was just, this is what I'm doing. The end. And stopping that negotiation with myself where I let some excuses and other things factor in was just, I mean, it is so powerful. And if you think about how many decisions you make or how much power lies in the decisions that you make, it's really cool to recognize that when you actually make a decision that you are really committing to, that you can stop the negotiation, which ultimately typically widens the gap between where you are and where you say you want to be. The other thing that is, I would say, the most important is that it removes the, well, I don't feel like it. Okay, because again, If I were to simply base things off of what I felt like, there are a lot of things that I would not do. There are a lot of things that I say are important that you wouldn't have evidence of. And so being able to remove that factor from it and say, it doesn't matter how I feel, with the exception, right, y'all, this does not mean that like if you feel physically ill, that you shouldn't listen to your body, okay? I'm talking when you are in a healthy mental and physical space that you can be so committed to what you're doing that how you're feeling, the fear, the doubt, all of that is not going to get in the way of what you're doing. It, again, minimizes the gap between where I am and where I want to be. And ultimately, I think it raises your floor. We talked in the other episode about what it looks like to raise your floor, right? And then how much more capacity you have for your ceiling when you raise your floor. And when you make a decision, you have the opportunity to raise your floor. Another example here. So today actually is voting day. Got my sticker on somewhere. And this morning, well, let me fast forward. Yesterday, today's Saturday. So yesterday, I was so tired. I had so many things that I was doing. I came home and I just kind of sat on the couch and I went to bed pretty early. And this morning I woke up and I was still tired. I was feeling overstimulated. And I knew I had actually met one of the candidates in this particular election, and I had made the decision I'm going to go vote on Saturday morning. So I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm committed to this decision. Well, my daughter woke up about the time that I did because we both went to bed early, and she was on one, and she was, Mom, what about this? Can we do this? And I was still overstimulated. And I told her I was going to go vote. She wanted to come with me. I think she's gone with me every single time that I've gone to go vote, which I value, right? I think it's so important. And truthfully, we got to a point where we're going back and forth when we're getting ready to get in the car. And I was like, nope, never mind. You're staying here with your dad. You're not going, right? That was based on my feelings. Overstimulated, exhausted, overwhelmed. But then I had to catch myself. I didn't have to. I chose to catch myself. And I thought, Asia, how you feel right now is not the fuel to make this decision. Okay? The fuel to make this decision is this. You want to be an example for your daughter. You want to show her the importance of voting. You want to show her the obligation that she has and the impact that she can have. And you want to show her this because you're going to actually do it and you want her to witness. You don't want to just tell her. And these are things that I already knew. These are decisions that I already made about how I wanted to raise my daughter. And if I would have let my feelings guide my decision, she would not have gone with me, right? And so it was hard because there was an easier path. And I remained loyal to who I want to be. And so she got in the car with me. We went. It was great. And she was really excited and she asked a lot of questions. And I just thought to myself, wow, look at you committing. Look at you making a decision. And then in every opportunity that you have to make a decision that aligns with that, look at you actually doing that. Had I relied on feelings, being motivated, I could have negotiated with myself and said, well, I'll take her the next time. Who knows if there's going to be a next time, God forbid. I could have said, I'll just take a picture of, the people that are outside and then I'll show it to her when I get home. I stopped that negotiation. I stopped that debate because I am committed to who I want to be. And I'm committed to making decisions, even when I don't feel like it, that align to that. And so, it's just such a blessing. It's such a cool opportunity that we get to make these decisions for ourselves and decide how we're going to show up and what we're going to do and what impact that's going to have. I think there's an element of consistency that naturally comes along with the conversation around making decisions, right? And as I was prepping for this, I thought about a lot of the conversations I've actually had recently around consistency. We've been talking about it as a market center, and I had some really good takeaways from all of those conversations. The first being, consistent people are not more motivated, they're more decided. Whoa. So the people who exercise every day, the people who read every day, the people who, I don't know, who are doing whatever crafts, are important to them, whatever hobbies are important to them, and they're doing those things with consistency, it is not because they're more motivated, which up until very recently, that's what I believed. It is because they're more decisive. It's because that when the opportunity for them to decide presents itself, they don't waver and they actually make a decision. Because there's also a way that you can convince yourself that you're not making a decision by waiting it out or whatever it may be, and you don't even realize that actually is a decision. But that's a whole nother topic. But nonetheless, that is what separates the people who are consistent and the people who are not, is simply that the people who are consistent are the people who are decided. They don't have some magic pill that every single day they just wake up and they're like, I am totally so excited today to make sure I eat the protein I need. Like, wow, this is going to be so good. There may be days, right? But that's not the norm. The decisions that you make carry you on the days when the feeling isn't there. And some days the feeling is there, and that is amazing, right? And you want to capitalize on that. And the reality is that is not going to be our daily experience. And so we want to rely on this decisions so that when the feelings are different or fleeting, right, that we can still be committed. All of us can think of a time where we've made a decision, right, about something, and a decision that we were proud of. And so the good news is we've made decisions before. We're going to have a million opportunities to continue to make decisions, and we have evidence that we are capable of making the decisions that ultimately are aligned to where we want to be. And so rely on that evidence that you've made hard choices before, right? When you didn't feel like it, when it felt really tough, when you felt fear and doubt, and yet you still did it. And so use that evidence to remind you that you can do it, that you can make the decisions. So to wrap it up, just a couple of reminders, okay? Number one, motivation is inconsistent. Okay, and you cannot wait to feel motivated to do something. Okay, you can't wait on that for your action. Consistency does not come from your feelings, it comes from your decisions. When you make decisions, you stop negotiating with yourself and you start to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And we all have a reminder that we have made decisions before that are decisions that put us on the path we want to be on. And so we have the capacity to do it again. All that to say, y'all, just decide, and then exercise your loyalty to yourself, right? And commit to that decision, and watch how your life changes. So my challenge for everyone is to think about, what have you been waiting on doing to feel ready? What have you been waiting on doing to feel motivated? What have you been waiting on that you're waiting for some feeling to come? And I want you to think about, if you made the decision today and you stopped waiting, what would you do? And then go and actually do that thing. Okay? So put in the comments, y'all, what decision are you making today? And let's hold each other to the standard of being loyal to ourselves in the decisions that we make. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And if this was something that was valuable to you, please also make sure that you share it out on social media. And then, as always, y'all, remember to be honest, stay intentional, and choose bold clarity.